So we are going to be reading the second half of Elon Musk's deposition transcripts. If you're finding this video first and you want to start with the first half, the part one of the reading, the link to that is in the description. We're going to get right into this because I was going to do this another day. Plans got switched. Let's see. We left off yesterday right when they were taking a break. Alex Spiro, Elon Musk's attorney, was trying to say, why do we even need a break? We're not going to go much longer. And Bankston's like, yeah, we might, and I need a break. So finally, a break was agreed to. They go off the record, and we're picking up right where they come back on. So they're putting a new exhibit up on the screen, Exhibit 5. Mr. Bankston, who is Ben Brody's attorney, says, all right, let's go ahead and put up tab W. What exhibit number are we on? Mr. Grant, who must be like a tech guy. Mark, we're on Exhibit 5, would be our next one. Bankston says, okay, let's go. We'll go ahead and we'll mark this one as 5. Bankston starts his questioning, and remember guys, when you see this answer here, just this little A on the side here, Q&A, it's the attorney, and then the answer, the A is for the witness. That's always going to be Elon Musk speaking. So Mr. Bankston starts his questions by saying, all right, what I want to ask you about Mr. Musk is some quotes from Mr. Isaacson's book. This is his biography that came out 6 months ago. And what we have here in front of us is, quote, I've shot myself in the foot so often, I ought to buy some Kevlar boots, Musk joked. Perhaps he ruminated Twitter should have an impulse delay button. Did Mr. Isaacson, was that an accurate representation he made of any exchange that y'all had? Elon says, I don't recall that exact exchange. Bankston says, okay. Do you feel like this statement is a genuine reflection of your feelings back in the summer of 2023 when you were participating with Mr. Isaacson? Elon says, I would say that I'm guilty of many self-inflicted wounds. Bankston says, okay, would you say that as of last summer, that you knew that you had some difficulties restraining your impulses on Twitter? Elon says, no, I wouldn't say that. Bankston says, I'm sorry. And then Elon starts to continue. I do believe that the bedrock of democracy is freedom of speech, and that we should have freedom of speech if we are to have a functioning democracy, and that, actions that result, that have a chilling effect on freedom of speech, like this lawsuit, I think are contrary to the public good. So Bankston says, I'm wondering if you didn't think that you were having difficulties restraining your impulses on Twitter. Why did you believe that maybe Twitter should have an impulse control delay button? Mr. Spiro objects to the form. Elon says, that's what I said. I think that's Isaacson. That's not a quote. That's Isaacson. Those are Isaacson's words, not a quote. So Mr. Bankston asks a question. Okay, well, I was going to ask you about that. Maybe you misunderstood my question was this a statement that we see here on the screen? Is that consistent with what your feelings were in 2023? I'm sorry, hold on. Before we go on, there's something here in the background. Elon says, let me take my son just came into the room. So I guess not, because they're on Zoom, guys. So, wherever Elon is doing this virtual deposition, his son comes into his room in the middle of it. So they go off the record for a minute here and come right back on 1 minute later. And then Bankston continues. My question to you, Mr. Musk, was, in this statement that we see on the screen, was whether the entire thing reflected your feelings back in 2023. And from what I think I understand from your answer about the second half being Isaacson, is that the second statement that's not an accurate reflection of your beliefs in 2023? Elon, well, it doesn't make sense because we actually do have the ability to edit tweets and put a time delay on tweets. And then Bankston says, okay, so this is something Isaacson may have gotten wrong? Elon says, that's just Isaacson's impression. I'm simply saying that I am, I've certainly done a lot of things that are self-inflicted wounds. So now they're going to enter a new exhibit. Bankston says, all right, let's go ahead and pull up tab X. And I want to ask you about this quote. It says, when asked why he doesn't restrain himself, Musk merrily admits that he too often shoots himself in the foot or digs his own grave. But, quote, life needs to be interesting and edgy, he says. And then he quotes his favorite line from the 2000 movie Gladiator. Are you not entertained? Is that not why you are here? So in this quote, did Isaacson accurately relay the things that you were saying? Elon says, I've not read the Isaacson book. In fact, I asked Isaacson if I should read it, and he recommended that I not. Any biography is going to be not the actual person, but the actual person as viewed through the lens of the biographer. So I wouldn't say this accurately represents me. So that seems like the artist subjective kind of thing. So Bankston says, okay, have you used that quote before from the 2000 movie Gladiator? Are you not entertained? Is that not why you are here, to describe your tweeting? Elon says, in a joking way, but not in a serious way. Bankston says, sure, because the line here, are you not entertained, is that not why you're here? Am I correct that that describes the entertainment value of the controversy that tweets can sometimes create? Spiro objects to the form. Elon says, well, I think, any medium which is not informative or entertaining or does not capture the interest of the audience will fail to, people won't tune in. So they're moving on to another tab. And this quote says from the Isaacson book, my tweets are like Niagara Falls sometimes and they come too fast. Musk says, just dip a cup in there and try to avoid the random turds. What kind of quote is this? What? I don't know if I'd want that word in my biography, but anyway. Do you think that's an accurate quotation from you? So Elon says, that is actually not accurate. What I'm referring to is that the things that I see on Twitter, not the posts that I make, are like Niagara Falls. Like, meaning like if you look at the sheer number of comments, likes, interactions of various kinds, my account is the most interacted with in the world, I believe. It is physically impossible for, any one person to see all of the interactions that happen. So the only way I can really gauge the interactions is by sampling them, essentially. Bankston says, got you. So would it be fair to say that Isaacson made a mistake here, and that what this really should say is not my tweets are like Niagara Falls, but everyone else's tweets are like Niagara Falls? Elon says, not exactly. It means all of what I see when I use the X app are all the posts that I see, and all the interactions that happen with those posts are far too numerous for any human to consume. Bankston says, okay, so when this quote talks about the random turds, those aren't your random turds. Those are other people's random turds. I mean, I suppose I could be guilty of a random turd too, but we need a counter here for this. What I'm actually referring to is that the only way for me to actually get an understanding of what is happening on the system is to sample it. Like, try to do, just like in statistics, you sample the distribution in order to understand what's going on, but you can't look at every single data point. Bankston says, okay, just wanted to make sure that you're testifying under oath that this quote was misattributed and that you weren't talking about your own tweets and your own tweets being random turds. Correct. Okay. This is not accurate. So they tell him to take that exhibit down. And let's see that wording one more time, the exact wording. My tweets are like Niagara Falls sometimes, and they come too fast. Just dip a cup in there and try to avoid the random turds. So he is talking about his tweets, but I kind of do see, you don't mean just the substance of my tweets. When I tweet, like if I were to say my videos are filled with like good fun, I could be including the chat when I'm saying something like that, and not just meaning what's contained in this rectangle where my face is part of. It could be containing the comments and the people that join in and guest and whoever's in the side chat, the live chat. So I don't think this is really misattributed. I think Bankston, maybe he's interpreting it correctly, right? But I think there's also a possibility that Elon's explanation also holds water. He's holding the cup and it holds water. Because when someone tweets, you consider the reply as part of the conversation. And I would not want to sit and spend my time trying to read every single tweet that interacts with an Elon Musk post. There's a lot of engagement. So this seems like a rabbit hole that Bankston tried to get something out of. And I don't think he really nailed it. But I see what he was trying to do. And then let's see, we're here somewhere. Yeah, so Elon ends up saying that that's not accurate, that his own tweets are random turds. Like 4 pages of that. So the next question, in general, when thinking about, well, let's start this way. You use your Twitter account to talk about news and current events, right? Yeah, and among other things. And in doing that, you are thus a consumer of news, information, a person. Like as a person, you consume news information, right? I contribute content and I consume content on the X platform. So guys, if you watched yesterday, Elon was struggling a little bit because he was saying he was saying Twitter first, and he was saying like Twitter X. He was like saying both. And then finally he started to just say X. So, you know, we all struggle in the real world. You hear me all the time say Twitter or X or whatever. That's always how I call it. Other people are like Twitter or X, formerly known as Twitter. Other people just say Twitter. Most people don't just say X, but now we're seeing in this deposition, it's like an hour in on their time, he's starting to just stick with saying X over and over. And I think it was today, thanks to Barbara, I knew this. Someone, I don't think it was him personally, but on their tech side, they tried to redirect all the URLs, switch the main domain name from Twitter to X, so everything would say x.com finally, instead of twitter.com and whatever else. But they didn't set up the redirect properly for all existing URLs to change the root domain name from directing from Twitter to x.com. So anywhere online that a URL still used the Twitter piece, twitter.com/ the content still exists somewhere, but that link no longer will serve it. If a web host is trying to use that URL to pull the information that's supposed to be there, because they didn't set up the redirect right. This is like what, multi-billion-dollar company? I shouldn't know more about this and how to do this the right way than it's a company with a whole team of people. But I digress, and we're just gonna call it X now because it's X. So hey Barbara, hey Tracker, and hey Scooter, thanks for your compliment. That's really awesome to see you all on the stream. And then, what do we mean, never get high on your own supply? Are we talking about the Niagara Fall and the cup? What's the supply here? So where am I? He's reading news and he contributes. And then now when consuming news content, you believe that Twitter is a better source of information. And now, so Bankston goes right to calling it Twitter. So Twitter is a better source of information than traditional news, right? I do. And then question, okay, you think one problem with traditional news is they're too slow, correct? Their latency, yes. They'll often take several days to write an article and then still be incorrect in what they write. Guys, I'm going to agree there. I'm going to agree there. You know, we've sat here in the cases that we've looked at and we've called out in certain cases in particular, Jonathan Majors is a big one. They're incorrect in what they're writing, or they're leaving a lot of things out by omission. And, you know, when it comes to latency, I didn't really see a latency issue. I saw a very speedy reporting on certain details in the Jonathan Majors case. But if we want to talk about the Courtney Clenny case, back in February, I got some exhibits, some video exhibits, and I was slow in uploading some of them. I started the first one in February, and then there were 3 others that I've uploaded since, starting about a week ago with them. But all the news reports from the last 8 days now were saying just released, newly released videos. And I'm just thinking the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office turned them all over to me in February. So I'm just kind of thinking like these major outlets missed all that. That was very latent, very, very delayed. And for me, this obviously is something I put up on YouTube, not X, but there are times where something does come up on YouTube or X that you don't see in the news. So I'm going to agree with him there. Just going to agree. I want to say hi, Michael Sanchez. How are you? It's good to see you over here. I was just over in AV's chat a little bit earlier and I saw you. I think I saw you over there very early on. So thank you for coming over here too. Let me know if you have an opinion on the Elon Musk defamation case. And we're going to a new tab, you guys. So I want to show you this tweet from the day of the brawl, okay? And you will see that there's someone complaining about using Google News and their complaints about it. And your response is, the thing about traditional news is by the time they actually publish anything, it's not news anymore. That's consistent with what we've just been talking about, right? Elon says the traditional, the legacy news industry is slow to publish and nonetheless wrong in what they publish, and with no one to correct them. Whereas when things are published to Twitter, they may be incorrect, but they are swiftly corrected. And then Bankston says, well, for instance, this tweet about Ben Brody, it wasn't swiftly corrected, was it? So Bankston laid a little trap there, guys. Elon says, I suspect that in the comments that were followed were, while I did not see them, there were many rebuttals to what I said. Bankston says, right, but isn't it? Elon kind of handled that right. Now, guys, if you were able to see the initial petition filing, Bankston included dozens of examples of these rebuttals in the reply to not just Elon Musk's tweet about Ben Brody, but others as well. Because it was all like quote tweets and replies. So that was almost a good trap, but he's like, yeah, there probably were rebuttals. And then Elon adds, he says, and there may be a community note. So if you missed yesterday, it seemed like Elon Musk was really trying to elevate the community notes feature of his platform, like promote the features of the X platform, because he kept community notes. They're great. They're better than sliced bread. So here we are again with the product placement. So since I did tag community notes to assess the accuracy of the post, that there may be a community note on that as well. And Bankston said, but you didn't know that, right? Elon says, I don't know that. Bankston says, right. I mean, there's not, I can tell you, but let me try it this way. Traditional news takes time to publish things, whereas on Twitter, you're reading about events before the news can even cover them. Is that right? And Mr. Spiro says, what's the relevance of this question to the fourth element? Mr. Bankston, his state of mind upon the information he relied on and why he relied upon it. Spiro says, no, I don't see that. I don't see the relevance of the question. Don't answer that. Bankston says, I need you to give him an instruction. Spiro says, I'm instructing you not to answer. Bankston says, Mr. Musk, are you going to obey the instruction from your attorney? Elon says, I think I should listen to what my attorney says. Bankston says, okay, you've called yourself a citizen journalist, right? Elon says, I encourage everyone to be a citizen journalist. Bankston says, right. And in fact, you advocate getting information about news and events from anonymous people on Twitter. I think it's important to allow people to be anonymous so that they're able to report things accurately and not face repercussions from their employer or from others. And then Bankston says, okay, you can and do use your Twitter account to promote the company's interest, the company being X Corp, right? Yes. The engagement, well, let's talk about it this way. Before you ever purchased Twitter, you were a popular user on the platform, right? Elon says, yeah, I believe. I was either the first or second most interacted with account on the platform before the acquisition. Now, before the acquisition, Twitter was getting a free benefit from the user engagement that you created, correct? Essentially, yes. And then now after the acquisition, that's no longer true. You personally benefit from the engagement you create because it's your company, right? Spiro says, objection. Instruct you not to answer. You can tell me the relevance of these questions. Bankston says, I need to establish the level of care that he was required to have, and I need to determine whether this is a purely personal Twitter account or whether this Twitter account is intended to do something else. So Spiro says, I don't see the relevance of this question. I'm going to instruct him. And Bankston says, well, it's gonna affect his level of care. Spiro says, yeah, I disagree, so I'm going to instruct him not to answer. Bankston, okay, so I'm just going to make it clear for the record that in order to establish under scripts the requisite level of care that I'll need to be proving in this case, I've been unable to ask the questions that will help me ascertain. Spiro interrupts and says, well, what question are you trying to ask that goes to the level of care in the case law? And Bankston says, I'm trying because the level of care will depend on the purpose of the speech itself, whether it has a commercial or non-commercial basis, whether it's purely private communication, whether it's a communication made by one who's engaged in spreading media for profit, all of these things, and whether it has a commercial character is all relevant. So Spiro says, but it's in the record, he owns Twitter, he owns X. So Spiro's calling it both. I think I can answer this question. Elon's like ready. He's like, let me do it. I'm ready. So Bankston says, hold on. You may be right. Hold on, Mr. Musk, hold on. There's no question, see you. Alex, you may be right about that. If you're willing to just go ahead and stipulate he is the owner of Twitter, that is not a purely personal account. That account also advances the interests of the company. We're done, and I won't have to ask any more questions. So Spiro says, well, Mr. Musk said he wants to. I'll let him answer the question if you want to rephrase it. So Bankston rephrases, and he says, sure. So let's go back to the question that we had, which was now that you've acquired the company, Twitter is no longer getting a free benefit. I mean, this benefits you as well. Your engagement that you create for the company. Is that correct? Elon says, not necessarily, so I believe my posting has really remained unchanged before and after the acquisition. And going back to the sort of self-inflicted wounds, the Kevlar shoes, I think I may have done more to financially impair the company than to help it. What do you guys think? But certainly I do not guide my posts by what is financially beneficial, but what I believe is interesting or important or entertaining to the public. So that's, if, in this specific case, if I wanted to have it receive a lot of distribution, I would have made it a primary tweet or a quoted tweet, which I did not. It was simply a reply. That's kind of a good point. The replies get 100 times less attention than a primary tweet. So this was certainly not any attempt to generate advertising revenue. In fact, generally, advertisers will not want to advertise with content that is contentious. And then Bankston says, well, I understand you said that this was a reply and that less people saw it, but Elon reiterates, by 100, yes. Bankston says, you do understand that the amount of people who saw this, who have viewed this tweet, is equivalent to all 30 Major League Baseball stadiums filled to capacity. You wouldn't dispute that? I mean, we're talking over 1 million people. Spiro objects to the form. And yeah, that may seem like a large number, but it is not compared to the fact. I believe there are something on the order of 5 to 8 trillion views per year. So 1 million is really, Bankston says, not a big deal. And Elon says, hit or miss, yeah. Bankston says, not a big deal that this went out to that many people. Elon says, correct. And more of a, this is the kind of thing where advertisers, when it's contentious, will not advertise, which means we don't get revenue from it. So he's drawing it back. Elon's drawing it back to the original topic of the question. But this is tricky here, right? Because in trying to explain, hey, this isn't great for, trying to monetize and advertise, he's also getting an acknowledgement of the amount of people, the amount of eyes on this tweet, this X post that is defamatory, is allegedly defamatory towards Ben Brody. So I know it's a little wrangling here. And if Bankston can kind of pull something out, let's see what Bankston does with it. So he says, after you took over the company, have you ever given any instructions or taken any steps to have users see your tweets in particular more often? So basically, are you boosting yourself? Elon says no. There was an error at one point that caused for one day people to see my posts, but the rules apply to me otherwise as they do to everyone else. There are no special rules for me. Bankston says, okay, I want to talk about, and then Elon says, I should mention that our algorithm is open source, as is meaning anyone can see the code for the recommendation algorithm. They can see that there's nothing special for me. And the community notes, which is, I think, the best fact-checking system on the internet, also is an open source, as is all the data. Okay, I want to talk about on the day you had this tweet on June 27th. I want to talk about if in your mind you were aware or considering any warnings you had been given, say in the last few months, about the level of care you were showing in your tweets. So I want to ask you some specific things about that, okay? And so the time period I want you to concentrate on is the approximately 6 months leading up to this tweet. Okay, so the end of 2022 up to mid-2023. That's I'm surprised Alex Spiro, maybe he'll wait till a specific question, but I'm surprised Spiro didn't butt in here, because he's kind of already tried to be like, we're here about one day, one tweet, so why are you talking about something 2 weeks ago? And then here we're like, we're gonna go back 6 months, and Alex isn't objecting. But, Oh yeah, and this is funny, right? And I get the open scope point, but it is very hilarious to hear, Elon Musk, I'd argue really anyone, with a certain stature of power, right? The rules apply to me as everyone else. Like, great, that sounds great. But in reality, like, come on. Come on. And then Michael Sanchez, you mentioned the River trial. I didn't get to see a lot of that case, but I do think it's really interesting that to me it just seems like the jury may have heard that he tried to lie and hide things, and I don't think that means someone's guilty. It could mean they're panicked, they don't know what to do, they think that they won't be believed. But I feel like maybe the jury couldn't overcome that. Maybe the jury couldn't overcome this idea that they're younger teenagers. And it's crazy to think that, younger teenagers can kind of like gang up on people and just would do that in the first place. But from what I saw about that case, I feel like the jury felt like they had to issue some kind of punishment and just did it. Even though I think there was a case there made for self-defense from the little bit that I did see. So 300 years that's a big number. That's a big number. But again, I don't know. I just don't know the whole case. I really only got to see some bits and pieces while I was doing other work. If you have other thoughts on it, I would love to hear. And then so I don't have a OJ commentary to do, but I do think we're going to hear a lot more commentary about the OJ trial now that OJ has passed away. Whenever you see like those comparisons come up all the time when you talk about do juries get it right, everybody wants to bring up the OJ trial. So now that he's passed away and he'll be on everybody's minds, I feel like that will weave back into a lot of, major trials, commentary on major trials, looking at different cases and legal proceedings and the criminal side, all because it's top of mind now. And then, hey, Mr. Minutes, good to have you join today. And then I forget where I was. So yeah, we're going back 6 months now to talk about if you should have been aware of the level of care that you use while you're tweeting. And then, okay, Elon's like, cool, let's do it. So Banks says, and during that time, I want to ask you about some situations. If people have ever voiced concern about the level of care you were showing when tweeting about factual events. And the first one I want to ask you about is, do you remember tweeting a conspiracy theory about the attack on Paul Pelosi? I do remember replying, again, not a reply as is in, if you want something to get attention, you do it as a primary post. A reply will get actually somewhere between 100 and 1,000 times less attention. And I read an article in a newspaper, or what claimed to be a newspaper, which seemed to be odd, and I did that as a reply, which is a low visibility post. Bankston says, okay, all I just need to know is if you remember that event happening, because my question to you is, Elon says yes. Bankston says, do you remember, was there anybody in your life, and let me preface this, not your lawyers. I don't want to know if your lawyers talk to you about anything. Any conversations you had with your lawyer are totally private, okay? But are there any conversations you had with anybody in your life where they warned you about the level of care you were showing when tweeting about factual events relating to that Pelosi tweet? Elon says, I don't recall anyone saying anything relating to that Pelosi post. But that was the reply post, I think, was just wondering if there's more to this picture than met the eye. And based on what I thought was, I think the Santa Monica Times or something like that, that turned out to be somewhat of a bogus publication, and I deleted the post shortly thereafter. Like, within a few hours. Ooh, what does this mean? What does this mean? Oh, once I realized something was bogus, somewhat of a bogus publication, started thinking there's more to this than met the eye, I deleted it shortly thereafter. Why is that a bad answer for Elon Musk here? Let's keep going. So, Exhibit 8, Bankston says, all right, can we bring up tab Z? They've gone through the whole alphabet, guys. We're going to be marking this. I believe this is Exhibit 8. This is another quote from Mr. Isaacson's book I want to ask you about, and it's referring to the Pelosi tweet. And it states Musk's tweet showed his growing tendency, like his father, to read wacky fake news sites purveying conspiracy theories, a problem that Twitter had writ large. He quickly deleted the tweet, apologized, and later said privately it was one of his dumbest mistakes. It was also a costly one. Now, I understand some of this is Mr. Isaacson's opinion, but in terms of the facts he described, I believe you've already confirmed for me that this is correct, that you deleted the tweet and apologized for it. Is that right? He says, I don't think I have a growing tendency to read fake news sites. I aspire to read the most accurate information possible. Bankston says, sure. I'm just asking you about these. I understand that Isaacson's going to characterize it, and other people are going to have their opinions too. What I'm asking is the factual information in this tweet, that you deleted it and you apologized. That's correct? That is correct. Did you later say privately it was one of your dumbest mistakes? Elon says, I don't recall. I've made some pretty dumb mistakes. I'm not sure this would qualify as one of the dumbest. So Bankston says, okay, would you say it's a mistake? Elon says, yes, that's why I deleted it. And apologize. So there's okays and interruptions here. Bankston says, okay, if you can take that down. If tweeting false conspiracy theories about the Pelosi's, who are public figures, is a mistake, isn't tweeting a false conspiracy theory about a non-celebrity, powerless guy like Ben Brody, isn't that even worse? Mr. Spiro, objection, and can you explain to me what the relevance of that is? Yeah, explain the relevance. Yeah, because he's going to give me an answer which is really relevant to his feelings and actual malice. Elon says, well, the post that you're referring, where I actually asked for it to be fact-checked, I think that is, I actually don't state that anything is anything, but simply that, from that post, it looks like it could be. And then I request community notes to fact-check. Bankston says, but wait, in your Pelosi tweet, didn't you say there's a tiny possibility that this could be more than it seems, and that was a mistake? So why isn't it a mistake to say this is probably the case with this kid. Why is that different? So Spiro objects. Improper question. Well, I asked for it to be fact-checked by community notes. This is like, this really feels like when you read something and you can tell that the person just has to keep name dropping their product sponsor. Mr. Bankston. Right. So, I mean, basically, your thesis is that you're depending on someone to come along after the fact and determine whether you said is true or false. Is that right? I'm asking to be corrected. Bankston says, right, after the fact. After it's already been said and out to the world, right? Elon says, well, how are you supposed to be corrected if it's not said, if it's not already said? Bankston says, thank you, Mr. Musk. I think you already answered this, but let me make sure I heard you correctly. Did you recognize in the summer of 2023 that you had a tendency to read wacky fake news, the wacky inflatable arm flailing tube man news? Elon says, I don't think I have a tendency to try to find. I aspire to be as truthful and accurate as possible, and to that is actually the goal of the X, formerly known as Twitter system. We're getting all the name schematics here for the platform. X, formerly known as Twitter, is to be the most accurate and timely source of information on the internet. That's why we put so much effort into community notes, which I'm confident is the best fact-checking system in the internet. Did you have anybody in your life who approached you to give you any warnings about the level of care you were showing while tweeting about factual events concerning the tweets that you were making about Yoel Roth? Now, how many times has Bankston asked this question? Someone's got to be here. Like, if they go to this case, right? Someone's here. They have someone that says, I tried to tell him. They've got to have someone. That's the indication I get from Bankston. Did you have anyone tell you? Did you have anyone tell you? Did you have anyone tell you besides attorneys? Did you have anyone tell you? Did you have anyone tell you? He's got to have somebody. Like, I'm just speculating, of course, but it's a lot of times for him to be asking that to get no's, I don't recalls. So Elon says, no, I don't recall that. Bankston says, nobody talked to you about that? Elon, not that I recall. Bankston says, okay, what about, same question. Elon says, is there something specific about Yoel Roth that you want to ask about? And then Bankston says, yes, very specific. Elon says, okay. Bankston says, very specifically, were there people in your life at all, who approached you to warn you about the level of care you were showing when tweeting about Yoel Roth? So, at all. Any single living, breathing thing. Elon says, I don't recall anyone doing that. Bankston says, okay, same question for Alder Thorlifson. Do you remember who that is? Elon says, yes. Okay, was that the raft? Oh my god, the cave guy? Oh my god, there's so many people that have been in. That was his other defamation case, I think, right? I think it was. I guess we'll find out. So, same question for Haraldur Thorlifson. Do you remember who that is? Yes. Okay. Did anybody warn you about your tweets about him and the level of care you were showing? He says, well, he actually responded to me directly, and I corrected myself. And I would say that at this point, he and I are friends. Bankston says, okay, apart from Mr. Thorleifson, did anybody bring their concerns to you about those tweets? Not that I recall. I mean, if they were, I think there were some people that replied that they thought he was a great guy, and I was like, okay, I'll take that under consideration, and I think he is a great guy. So Bankston says, a month after the events in this case with the neo-Nazi mass shooting in Allen, Texas, Mr. Spiro interrupts. Look, I'm going to object again. I was going to let you do a couple of these because it's not necessarily worth arguing about each and every one, even though I don't think it's relevant. But now you're backdooring all the stuff in through the fourth category that the judge proposed, when in the judge's instructions, they very much limit the tweets to the tweets in question in this case. And so we're not going to do any more on it. So I'm instructing him not to answer any more questions about any other tweets in this case for the rest of the deposition. You can go to the judge if you don't like that instruction. Now, this is where I want to pause because I'm 100% convinced that Bankston knew he was going to make this deposition public while he was taking this deposition. Because he got the transcript to us right away. That's why we have it. And I suspect that Spiro, if the judge has truly limited, if there's a motion, maybe we can go find it. But if the judge did give this limiting instruction, hey, for this deposition, you know, its purpose is limited to establishing what you need to use to establish your 4 elements to make your case of defamation. And it's got to be pertinent to the tweets that you say are defamatory. Your line of questioning has to be relevant to the tweets, the subject matter of this case, the posts, the X posts. So if Spiro is if the premise here, if the judge really did give that limiting instruction, I do think that Bankston is doing this knowing that this deposition is just going to be sitting here for us to be reading. I mean, it's interesting stuff either way. Like, I'm not going to say, like, oh, it's pointless, I'm not interested in it. I'm interested in it. But I do see what Spiro's actually trying to say here. Even though he was saying it about everything earlier, he did let Elon answer a whole bunch of stuff, and he is finally like, come on, this is outside the scope of what the judge is permitting. So, and normally it wouldn't really matter, because when it comes to a trial, if there's something in a deposition that, you know, you object to, it's not relevant, that stuff may not be able to come in, even if deposition testimony is introduced in the trial. Say the witness doesn't come testify in person and they agree to allow the deposition testimony to be played in front of the jury. There's still things that can be edited out of it and cut out of it for relevance, leading objections, any objection that's sustained. But since this is leaked, we're seeing it all, even if it's not actually going to be allowed to be used in the trial. So now Spiro's probably saying, I'm going to stop you there because I have the foresight here that you're going to try to let the public know these questions. These questions are for the public, not for your case. So Bankston says, let's put it on the record that your statement is just incorrect. The order does not limit me to the tweets in this case. Spiro says, we disagree. We disagree whether the judge is sitting here. We disagree whether if the judge was sitting here would allow you to go through each and every tweet. So Bankston says, okay, I'm going to start over before you interrupted me. And I'm going to go ahead and state what I need to say on the record. Again, this is not for you. This is for the judge, right? I am now being told that there are events that I want to talk to him about, whether he's been given warnings about his level of care. These are not about tweets in the case. These are about the topic on his state of mind at the time the alleged defamatory statement was allegedly published, and warnings he may have received in advance of that tweet about the level of care that he was habitually showing are clearly relevant. I've now been told I'm not going to be allowed to ask any more questions about that, so I'm going to have to move on. Madam Court Reporter, can you let me know where we are on time, or videographer? The videographer says, yes, you're at 1 hour and 20 minutes exactly. Mr. Bankston says, all right. So one thing, it might be like a 2-hour schedule for the deposition. And then, actually, let me see what you guys are saying over here. Call him Mr. Semicolon. When I see the word Spiro, I always think of Spyro the Dragon. That's what I think of. Yeah, and the relevance is this entire case. Wait, why are we talking about Adam Sandler? I think I'm just gonna be lost. I think I'm going to be lost if I try to catch the Adam Sandler reference, so I'm going to come back over here. Although all I can think of when I think of Adam Sandler, and I don't have like Adam Sandler hate, I've like seen tons of his movies and I do laugh at them, but I love there's a Family Guy scene where there's just like a seagull. It's like an empty movie theater for Adam Sandler movie, and it's just a seagull laughing. And that was the dig that Family Guy took at him. But I think it's really funny, even though I like Adam Sandler. Let's see. Okay, so we're going back to... So one thing I want to talk to you about is that we had mentioned before these tweets from Dr. Frenzer and Matt Wallace 888. Do you remember talking about those? Elon says yes, because this was an hour ago. This was within the last hour. Bankston says, okay, I know that we're not sure, like, I know that you don't have knowledge sitting here today, whether or not you saw additional tweets from those people, whether you saw their profiles, so I know that's not something you have personal knowledge of today. But what I wanted to do, well, first let me start this way. When you click a user's profile, a timeline comes up and it loads the first several tweets that they have on their page, correct? Yes. Okay. And then you can either scroll down and you can just keep going on their tweets, right? Elon says, yes. Bankston says, okay, but when you first load it up, it just loads the first several from, the past several that they've had, right? And then Elon says the most recent, yes. And then Bankston says, in chronological order, right? Okay. So what I want to do now, I'm surprised Elon didn't jump in here. Because when you're on X and you're just reading you go to their profile and you just scroll down. You don't click into any other tabs. You don't click likes, pictures, replies. You're just on the main profile and you're scrolling. First, they could be a pinned post that could be as old as they want it to be. Whatever post they pin, it's just that date. So the first one you see could be from a long time ago. But you can also like retweet things, repost things, and it'll come up on your timeline. your retweet might be a new action, but what you're retweeting could also be old. So it to be in chronological order, I'm surprised that that wasn't corrected for accuracy here. And maybe it's not important to correct, but there's just been a few times where I feel like Bankston doesn't have a great grasp on how the platform works to an ordinary daily user. And sometimes things like this, I feel like, show it. So he's like, in chronological order, right? Okay. So what I want to do is, I know you don't know, I want to show you some tweets from that timeline, and you can tell me if you've seen some of these tweets or not. Does that sound okay? Are we able to do that? Elon says, yeah. So now we're on Exhibit 9. So first I want to talk about Dr. Frenzer, okay? And so I want to show you the tweets that are on the timeline on that date that you saw the tweet. So we first bring up Tab M. Okay, Mr. M, I thought Tab M was going to be a Matt Taibbi reference. Mr. Musk, this, as you see, is a tweet from June 25th, 2023 at 12:06 p.m., okay? Okay. And here it says at the top, quote, "Is this meme insensitive to Jewish persons?" And then there's a meme from the United Nations logo that says, quote, "Founded in 1945 to end all wars, the United Nations. The world has been at war ever since." End quote. Do you know if you saw this? Elon says, I have not seen this. So then Bankston says, okay, would this have triggered a red flag as to this person's credibility? Mr. Spiro, objection to form. Elon says, I mean, I think it's a dubious post, but it suggests anti-Semitism. Bankston says, correct. So what I'm asking you, though, not whether, I think we all know it reflects anti-Semitism, I'm asking, does this trigger red flags as to this person's reliability? Elon says, I would say yes, it probably does. Bankston says, let's go ahead and look at tab M. Elon says, but if you're suggesting that in order to reply to anyone, you have to scroll through all their posts, that would make it impossible to use the system. Bankston says, all right, we're looking now at tab M. We're going to mark this as, I'm sorry, I don't believe we marked that last exhibit. So tab M, the meme we just looked at, that would be exhibit 9, correct? And let me pause here. Ben Brody wants a jury trial. He's requested a jury trial. So if this goes to trial, what do you think voir dire is going to be like? You know, jury empanelment, selecting jurors. Because this is pretty quick of Elon to catch, I think. And you see sometimes people put, especially people that are in like, you know, their attorneys or whatever, they put things in their bio to indicate retweets, reposts are not endorsements, likes are not endorsements. They like people, there's people in the public that feel like they need to clarify that the things I do on this platform don't mean I'm fully engaged or endorsed or aligned with something just because I'm interacting with it. So if ordinary people have to say that, and Elon very quickly called this out, if Bankston wants to kind of go down this line of argument, but he has someone sitting on the jury that's worried about, you know, I actually have a friend that does YouTube videos, like in the gaming space, video gaming space. And he's like the nicest person ever. I don't think I've ever heard him say a mean thing. I don't think he's ever like I don't think he even really curses that much. Like, but he's like, oh my God, like, I'm so scared of someone trying to cancel me. And it's like, cancel you for what? But I feel like that's something that could be on someone's mind. And if Bankston's going to kind of hint at this idea that if you don't look before you interact with somebody on the timeline, if you don't look at that person's, who they are, and understand exactly where they come from, how reliable they are, but you go and interact with them, now you're kind of attached to their reliability. And you're culpable for their reliability. I think that's a dangerous line of argument. We're just seeing a sample. A deposition is meant to gather information, but it's meant to gather information for things you plan to argue for the you know, as the case progresses. And if it gets to trial in front of a jury, you can't have anyone sitting on that jury that would be worried, well, hey, I don't want someone to think I'm a horrible person because I used to use a word in the 80s that's taboo to use now. Like, what do you think? Like, that's a voir dire issue. That's something that I think will be very interesting for Bankston to select people for. But in any case, I think, you know, Elon's response is you know, that's just Elon trying to have a rebuttal. But I think his rebuttal happens to have be a broader talking point for regular people. So they're moving on to this new exhibit here. And then you said he does seem to be full of hot air. Is that a Spiro joke? So they're on the meme that we just looked at. That's exhibit 9. because that wasn't marked, they didn't mark it. And then they enter Exhibit 10, tab N. This is a picture of a photoshopped meme of the president and former First Lady Obama, where it has a shirt that was Michelle Obama's shirt. It says, "I come in peace," and the Barack Obama t-shirt says, "I'm peace." Oh, damn, they got me by reading that out loud. You would agree with me this is a joke based on the lie that Michelle Obama is transgendered. Elon says, "I'm not sure I read that much into it, but it's clearly this account is not a fan of Barack Obama." Bankston says, "Would you have taken, if you had seen, first of all, have you seen this tweet? Did you see this tweet?" No. Bankston says, "Okay, would this have triggered a red flag as to this person's reliability?" Elon says, "It would have simply, I think, indicated that they are probably not a supporter of Barack Obama." And Bankston says, "Right. But would you think that they're a reasonable person who's reliable? Would that trigger any red flags for you?" Elon says, "Well, I think one has to give some allowance for a sense of humor and satire and parody." Bankston says, "Is that what this is to you, or is this just bigotry?" So Spiro objects. He says, "This has nothing to do with the case. And we're not going to do any more hypothetical. If you'd seen these tweets, what would your reaction have been? Or if you'd seen this, what would in this hypothetical world? I understand your point, that if he had checked, he could have seen these things. The point has been made. It's clear. We're not doing any more questions on this." So Mr. Bankston says, "So you're going to instruct him not to answer on something that you think the point is clear and relevant? That's your..." So Spiro says, No, I don't think any of this is relevant at all." Bankston says, "Okay, so let's go ahead." Spiro goes back to talking. "In fact, I know it's not. I know it's not relevant, and I know it's not, and it violates the court's order, so no, I let you answer, ask a couple questions on it, simply because I know that you want to, and I'm not trying to interrupt this and get this over with. But at the same time, you're just harassing him about unrelated things, and you're doing it on purpose, and it has nothing to do with anything." Bankston says, "No, I'm not." Spiro says, "So we're done on that." Bankston says, "Here's the thing. I'm going to go ahead and make this record again for the court because, once again, I've been shut down in the relevant topic area. I'm facing a situation where I must prove certain facts, which may have triggered different duties in this case. One of those is not a subjective analysis of whether the source is reliable, but an objective analysis of the source is reliable. And if that source is unreliable, there is an arguable basis that a defendant will have to exercise greater care, and that could reflect more actual malice if the person purposefully avoided any investigation into the credibility of an unreliable person. I would like to establish A, whether he has seen these tweets, as though he has already said he does not know and cannot tell me what tweets from these people he's seen. And 2, I would like to establish these people are unreliable. I understand that you're instructing the witness not to answer it, and so I will have to add that to whatever relief we're going to seek from the court. All right, Mr. Mouse, let's go ahead and take that down. You would agree with me that even after the suit, you're still promoting the idea that there may be a conspiracy or false flag behind neo-Nazi demonstrators that we're seeing in the streets. Elon says, "I think I have to consider that is a possibility. Do I think it's likely? No. But do I think it's impossible? I think it's also not impossible." Mr. Bankston says, "Okay, let's take a look at tab I. I believe we'll be marking this as Exhibit 9. Mr. Grant says, 11, mark. Mr. Bankston, wow, we're getting up there. So they enter an exhibit. Let's go ahead and scroll out of this so you can see the whole tweet. We might need to be a little more than that. Yeah, we're going to have to go up from top to down. So I want to ask you first, do you remember in January that there was another event, another white supremacist demonstration that involved masked white supremacist protesters? Do you remember that?" "I vaguely remember that. Something like that." Okay, so I want to go down these tweets really quick. We have first embedded in the quote tweet. I'm going to start here with Ian Miles Chung. All right, he says, "What's the deal with these Patriot Front guys' vehicles? Their license plates are completely blank." Now, I think Ian Miles Chung would have been a great example to start with. Why? Because I feel like he has a reputation. He's widely known. His name is known. He's, I think he's been in spaces. Whatever it is, I'm pretty sure there's been, like, not one-on-one, but like group interactions that Elon and him have had either on the timeline or in spaces over on X. But Ian is known. He's not just like some random account. He's criticized publicly and often for his reliability issues. So to me, that would have been a great thing for Bankston to lead with instead of all these little things. But again, this is not in front of a jury, right? This isn't, in front of a jury, you might want to lead with the big boom, right? So But still, I think that this would have been a lot more direct, a lot more relevant. It would have avoided some of these areas where I do quite frankly think Elon had a chance to give a broadly appealing answer without giving Bankston the answer that he wanted to hear. So maybe he should have started with Ian Miles Chong sooner. But all right, he says, quote, "What's the deal with these Patriot Front guys' vehicles? Their license plates are completely blank." Oh my god, did he really tweet that? Wherever the picture was from probably just blanked them out. And then we have an account called Wall Street Silver who quotes that tweet and says, quote, "The fact that the legacy media shows zero curiosity about unmasking these guys tells us 100% these are federal agents or paid stooges of one of the agencies. The media has been instructed by the FBI to just report that Patriot Front exists, white supremacy group, and don't dig any deeper. Let's go ahead and scroll down." And then Elon immediately, without even being answered a question, just says, "Yeah, I wouldn't agree with that statement." So, and yeah, like this is like the word 100% is in it for one. Two, this is the, what was this from? Wall Street Silver. He's like, the fact, 0, 100%, obviously, like all of these very assertive statements. Elon, without being asked a question, says, "Yeah, I would not agree with that statement." Bankston says, the next tweet from Wall Street Silver says, quote, "If Patriot Front was actually a real organic white supremacist group, the media would be all over the story to expose every member and ruin their lives. The fact that this is not happening confirms they're feds." Then there's a response to these tweets from you, and it says, quote, "Seems like they should be followed and unmasked. Why doesn't the media or government care about their identities?" End quote. Correct? Elon says, yes. Bankston says, okay. So this, I think, again, is reflecting the concern that you were stating earlier that you think it's a possibility, though unlikely, that these people could be involved in some sort of false flag. Elon says, yes, and I mean, the FBI has testified that there have been FBI agents at some of these demonstrations, but he would not speak to the number, which specific demonstrations and how many there were. So the FBI director's on record is saying that there are at least some FBI agents that are embedded in these organizations. And I'm wondering if he's like a recent example of that was like the Governor Whitmer, and the kidnapping. Wasn't some of that because they tried to argue entrapment because there was some involvement of FBI provocateur agents at some point in the timeline. That's as much as I can say because I don't know details beyond that. But this is the kind of thing where Elon's giving a bit of basis for reasonable belief to ask a question. So Bankston says, "I'm wondering, have you brought that up? Are you aware of sitting here today?" Or actually, let me rephrase that. So get on your feet, Bankston. "Were you aware of any information as of June 27th, 2023, similar information that would suggest that it has been confirmed that college students or Antifa members were impersonating white supremacist members?" Elon says, "I don't know confirmed, but I think this is a certain possibility. Certainly a possibility. I mean, and my post there I think is quite reasonable, which is that we should try to find out. We should try to get to the bottom of this, and we should try to figure out who these people are. And if they are neo-Nazis, we should know who they are." And then Bankston says, "Right." And then Elon keeps talking. I have a point I want to make. But Elon does keep talking and says, "And there should be greater curiosity about tracking them down and understanding, the role of the government here. As I mentioned, the director of the FBI has testified that there have been FBI members in a number of these events, but he will not say, he refused to answer to what degree, how many there were. Was it 1? Was it 1%, 5%, 10%? It's uncertain. So I think if we want to get to the bottom of this, because I think if we get to the bottom of this, we can actually, if it turns out everything, there aren't any FBI members or other government members, then we can do away with this conspiracy theory. But if there's an unusual number of government members present, then that bears further questioning of why there were, a large number of government employees of one kind or another present at these gatherings. And if the government and the media were uninterested in finding out who these people were, that would be concerning, wouldn't it?" So he says, yes. Elon says, yes, it does seem odd that the media would not want to track down who these people are. Now, the point I said I wanted to make is it's interesting here, and I don't think that this is interesting for Bankston so much that it's interesting that you have someone who's a powerful person in association with the X platform. He's a powerful person in association with social media in general now because of that position. But what he's saying is, I think we should do unmasking. And unmasking kind of, there is an undertone there of vigilantism, citizen journalism, going more than just looking for information, but perhaps to the point of something that could fall into the realm of doxing. So what's interesting to me is seeing him say this. It almost seems like an encouragement that an ordinary person might not take to an extreme. And this is a deposition testimony that, probably wasn't expected to be posted online a few days after it was taken. Maybe it was expected to become part of the public record at some point. But he's answering in a room one-on-one. But now that people are reading this, like, sometimes when you say things, people could take what you say and go to the extreme with it. And here you have him saying, go ahead and unmask people. I think it's great to look for answers. I think there's some people that would take that sentiment to the extreme and think it means you can just walk up and grab at somebody and do whatever because you want to know something. It's not... I don't know. Not everybody out there is rational. So they move on to another exhibit here. So they're on exhibit 12. Mr. Bankston says, definitely. Seems very odd. Can we bring up tab J? Now that's exhibit 12. And Bankston says, all right, I want to show you another tweet. So Spiro says, is this another unrelated to the tweet in the case? Bankston says, it's not unrelated at all. It's not the same. Spiro says, we're not doing this. He's not answering this question. We're not talking about this. You're exceeding the judge's orders. Bankston says, you can just give your instruction. All you've got to do is give your instruction. That's all you've got to do. Spiro says, he's not answering this question. Bankston says, all right, so here we are. And then Mr. Spiro says, ask about every tweet. I mean, it makes no sense. Oh, Elon says, I mean, it may make sense. And then Bankston says, Mr. Musk, there's not a question posed to you right now. What was Elon gonna say? He just says, okay. Bankston says, there's no question posed to you right now. I'm going to go ahead and make a record on this document because we are looking at it as the exact same type of event that was in this case. A group of Patriot Front white supremacists who've been rounded up and are in masks. The exact MO of the people engaged in this tweet, accusing these people of not being real, of accusing the media of not removing their masks. We have community notes, both on the tweet and Mr. Musk's tweet, that say their masks actually were removed after their arrest. Their names and faces. Spiro says, can you blow this up? We can't know what you're making a record of because we can't see it. So Bankston, and then Elon just says, I can see it. So Bankston says, Mr. Musk can see it and I can see it. Spiro says, but I'm the lawyer and I can't see it. Fair enough. So Bankston says, Mr. Musk, there's not any question for you. Go ahead and zoom it in because Mr. Spiro's having some trouble seeing it. And Spiro says, it's just not big enough for me to see. So Bankston says, you might want to scroll it over so he can see it very well. The witness says, this is a clear example of community notes. So Elon's trying to talk about how community notes is the best fact checker on the internet again. Mr. Musk, there's not a question. Elon says, please don't interrupt me. Please don't interrupt me. What are we doing? Bankston, I'm going to interrupt you, Mr. Musk, because there's not a question on the... Spiro says, you shouldn't interrupt him, Mark. Bankston says, there's not a question, Alex. Gosh, Spiro says, okay, he's talking, so you shouldn't interrupt him. Bankston says, but that's not responding. Witnesses cannot just start talking in court. Mr. Spiro says, if you're going to yell, Mark, we're going to cut off your deposition. Mr. Musk, you can continue finishing your... Bankston says, he actually can't, Alex. He has no question posed to him. Spiro says, actually, he can. I told him he can. Bankston says, all right. So Spiro's like, let him talk about community notes. Let him finish. Bankston says, all right, so Mr. Spiro has just instructed the witness, Mr. Spiro, I can't see the date on this. What is the date of this document? I can't see the picture. Bankston says, scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. Elon says, what is your question? Mr. Bankston, February 20th, 2024. Just like we've been talking about, this event happened in January 2024. Wait, so now we're all the way very recent. Again, I know you're not going to ask him. Let him answer these questions. So please just let me make my record on this document. I'm asking him about these documents for the reasons stated above that we've discussed. With the exact same type of event, with the exact allegations of Mr. Musk promoting the exact same types of ideas, except we have community notes here showing that their masks were removed, and the media were actually interested in their identities. We believe that these tweets and inquiry about them is extremely relevant to the exact type of state of mind when he made the exact type of same statements about the exact same type of event. Community notes has changed recently. I don't know how, like, from what I'm thinking, it was before, it was still 2023. So this is another area where I'm like, Bankston, you better be prepared for someone to tell you, well, that's not exactly how it works, or it wasn't the same. Like a tech platform issue here. Like Bankston did not seem to come fully prepared with an understanding of the nuances of, surface level features on X. And he's recovered from some of that. But other times I'm like, you should have just known that before you ask questions about it. But let's see. Obviously, we're being told that we're not going to be able to ask these questions. We do not feel that is proper. We'll move on to the next topic. Elon says, no, go ahead and ask your question. Mr. Bankston says, no, Mr. Musk, your attorney gets to decide. So, hold on. I think what's happening here is Musk already saw what was on screen and wanted to refute it. So, Spiro says, no, Mr. Musk wants to answer your question. Ask your question. Bankston says, okay, so let's zoom back out so we can ask you about this. Okay, then let's go back up to the top tweet. And notice we didn't have this complaint in this motion for sanctions. Bankston doesn't complain about this part. He doesn't think that this is a problem. Like, oh, he's telling me to ask questions that I don't want to ask anymore. He didn't raise an issue with that. I wonder why. So they zoom back up. They're going to ask. Bankston says, okay, we're zooming back up to the top tweet, and go ahead and zoom in a little bit on that top tweet so everyone can see. And what we have here is a person named Champagne Joshi, maybe. I'm doing the same thing. And let me move my window so I can see that. He says, Fed front, how many times have you seen a group of masked men dressed exactly the same, handcuffed where not one mask pulled off to reveal their identity? You see in the picture below, we now have a bunch of masked individuals, and none of them have their mask removed. Do you see that, Mr. Musk? Yes. Okay. And now below, there's a community note that says their masks were removed in public, and their names and faces from arrest records are here. And it has a link to a news story on spokesman.com. Now, below that is a tweet from you, and I'm going to assume I'm correct when I make this assumption that when you made this tweet, the community note had not yet been applied to the tweet above your tweet. Elon says that's correct. And then Bankston says, okay, so after you tweeted, then community notes came along and corrected both you and the person who were tweeting in this case, correct? Elon says, yes, which is exactly what community notes, please let me finish my answer. This is exactly what community notes is intended to do. And I am the one who has pushed community notes heavily on the system. It was a tiny backorder thing called Birdwatch, because the Twitter used to be birds. And I said community notes seems to be me to have potential to be the best fact-checking system on the internet. And I insist that anyone be fact-checked, including myself. So there are no limits on who gets fact-checked, whether they're presidents of countries, whether they're advertisers. In fact, this has caused us to lose advertising revenue because advertisers have been community noted. Oh, that's hilarious. I wonder who. I wish, can you imagine like those commercials on TV that like show like the happiest people ever on some like pharmaceutical product, and then they're like quietly speeding off the symptoms at the end, the side effects at the end. If they had to be more accurate on the visual representation of those commercials. Community notes in real time on TV could be very hilarious, guys. So Elon goes on to say, I have been community noted, and the community notes code is all open source, and the data is open source, so any third party can confirm exactly how community notes works. So this is a very good example of community notes correcting something that's incorrect. Bankston says, now, Elon goes on, and this is an example of the system working well. It's the same, okay, so every time he says it, what is his exact phrase? The best fact-checking system on the internet. That's the exact phrase. It's like it's like a branded tagline, like a trademark tagline. He says it the exact same every time. So Bankston goes on to say, now, you would agree with me that everybody who saw these tweets before the notes were added, each of those people may have been provided incorrect information. Spiro objects to form. Elon says there would have been absent initial misimpression, however, there would have been absent initial misimpression. However, community notes also goes, and any interaction with, If you interact at all with a post that is community noted, you're subsequently informed that a community note was placed on that post, and you're notified about the community note. I didn't know that. That's cool. And then by Mr. Bankston, you mean if I viewed the tweet, I'm given a notice? And then Elon says, if you have any interaction with the tweet. Bankston says, what does an interaction mean? So then Elon says, comment like a bookmark, a favorite, any kind of interaction. Elon says, Bankston says, so if I saw these tweets before the community notes, and I did not like, bookmark them, or physically interact with them in some way, I'm not notified when they're corrected. Then not in that case, but we also post all community notes are publicly available. So, and we have a helpful notes. So helpful notes have surfaced. Now hold on. Before we go any further, this is a tweet or a post, and then Elon replied to the post, right? So typically, and there are exceptions to this. Like this might not be the case if you're following Elon Musk, but for most people, if they saw the tweet, if they saw Elon's reply as a reply because they looked at the initial tweet, they would have interacted with the initial tweet, which ended up getting a community note, and they would have gotten this alert. But I don't know if Elon will even catch that to call that out. I don't think Bankston will. Like Bankston's learning in real time, and he's fielding it here. Here he's being told how the feature works, grasping it quickly, and then saying, well, what if I just viewed it and didn't interact with it? He was quick with that. And then he says, but I'd have to go and look for that, right? The helpful notes that you just keep posted publicly. Elon says, yes, if you care about the truth, you would need to go look about it, yeah. Bankston says, that's an interesting point. If you care about the truth, you need to go look for the truth, right? You would need to make an effort. Would you agree with that? And then Elon says, not much of an effort. This is where I think the media was eating Elon up for this deposition. Bankston says, not much of an effort? I got you. So Elon says, it is also the case that all the people that viewed this post, probably the vast majority of them, did in fact see the note. Bankston says, how are you able to say that? What data are you relying on to say that? And then Elon says, the note is applied within a few hours, sometimes less than that. Bankston says, how do you know that? Elon says, that's how the notes work. Bankston says, wait. You're saying that these notes appeared on these tweets within hours. Elon says, that is sometimes less than that. Bankston says, and sometimes a lot more, sometimes days, right? Elon says, days? No, Bankston says, no, I'm wrong about that. Elon says, yes. Bankston says, okay, all right, Mr. Musk, you can take that down. Through your businesses, I presume you're familiar with the concept of due diligence. So he's going to use exactly what he set up here. If you care about the truth, you should go look for it. And he's going to slap him with it. Elon says, yep, I care about due diligence. And then Bankston says, okay, before making a major decision in your business that could affect a lot of people, you practice due diligence as a matter of principle. Spiro objects to form. Elon says, in acquiring a company, what are you talking about here? Bankston says, no, not acquiring a company, no. I'm talking about before making a major decision in your business that could affect a lot of people. You practice due diligence as a matter of principle. So he's trying to 9-course meal this, take everything from the deposition and tie every detached point together here to lasso around Elon. Elon says due diligence is a legal term. I'm not sure I understand your question because you've conflated a legal term with something that is in the common vernacular. Bankston says, let's take the legal term out then. I think we can make it easier if we just take out the legal term. Before making a major decision in your business that could affect a lot of people, you take care before making those decisions. You put a lot of care into your business decisions. Is that right? Elon says, I aspire to apply the amount of care. I mean, there's only so many hours in the day. One cannot do everything. So I'm only human. So I aspire to be diligent and accurate. Bankston says, okay. Elon, to the best of my ability. Bankston says, okay. And because I think you understand that when you make major decisions in your business, that could affect a lot of people, right? Elon says, of course. And Bankston says, it's very important to be very careful in decisions that affect a lot of people. Elon says, yes. Bankston says, okay. You understood in the summer of 2023 that anytime you say something on Twitter, a very large number of people will see it. Elon says, that number varies tremendously. Bankston says, but it's always very large? Elon says, it depends on what your definition of very large is. Bankston says, would you agree with me that Would you agree with me that, say, over 500,000 people is a pretty big group of people? Elon says yes. And then Bankston says, and pretty much anytime you press tweet, it's post. It's going to be more than 500,000 people. Spiro says, Mark, you're interrupting him. Elon says, no, that's not true. Spiro, Mark, you're interrupting him at the end of his answers again, so please don't do it. Bankston says, so you think there may have been times where you tweeted and 500,000 people, there weren't 500,000 views on that? Elon says, you can look at my feed and see that is obviously true. Bankston says, okay, but you would agree with me that the vast majority of the time your tweets are going to be seen by more than 500,000 people. Elon says, only if I do a primary post, meaning not a reply, then certainly more than 500,000 people will see it. Bankston says, a lot. Elon's still talking and says, but as a reply, sometimes it may be 10 or 20,000, and that doesn't necessarily mean that people read it. It just means it was sent to their device or their computer. Bankston says, all right, let's put it this way. You know that every time you press tweet, there is a reasonable possibility that a very large number of people could see it. Elon says yes. And you understood in the summer of 2023 that as a general concept, false information can be damaging to people and their lives. Elon says it is possible for false information to be damaging to people and their lives. Yes? Well, I mean, he was almost very intimately involved with probably the most famous defamation case with Depp vs. Heard. So, yeah, hopefully he understands that possibility. Because I think he may have helped someone sue for it, so. Bankston says, so you also knew in the summer of 2023 that anytime you tweeted and that tweet contained false information about a specific individual, that there was a chance that that tweet could damage or harm them. You knew that? Elon says, I do my best to be as accurate and truthful as possible and to seek community notes for other fact-checking when publishing something. We really should have done a ticker. It is also true that newspapers print things that are false or misleading, or that they fail to print things that are, in fact, true. Definitely. That's a big part of my business. Absolutely. You're right 1,000%. And I think you would agree that newspapers often don't meet their responsibilities, do they? They're not as diligent as they could be, are they? So Elon says, newspapers, I think, have a fundamental flaw relative to a system like the X platform, where there's not an easy way for people to rebut a statement, it's extremely easy to rebut any statement, even in the absence of community notes, simply by replying. Sure. Bankston says, let's go back to my foundation here that I want to ask you about, which is that on June 2023, you knew that if you pressed tweet on a tweet and it contained false information about a specific individual, that it was very likely a reasonable possibility that a lot of people would see it and therefore there would be harm done to the person with false information. You knew that there was a risk anytime you press tweet, correct? So Elon says there's some risk that what I say is incorrect, but one has to balance that against having a chilling effect on free speech in general. Chilling effect. Which would undermine the entire foundation of our democracy. Bankston says, got you. So, Elon says, and if I were to take issue with you, Mr. Bankston, that would be my concern about you. Bankston says, okay, I know you do. I know we have very opposite concerns that are very much in each other's face. I understand. What I want to know is, did you think in your state of mind on June 27th, 2023, that it was allowable, that it was okay for you to take a risk with false information, because the alternative means restraining yourself and in doing damage to the concept of free speech? Is that what you thought? Elon says, I believe it's important to try to find the truth of things. Bankston says, I do too. Elon says, and sometimes in questioning things, I'm simply trying to find out what is true at any given point in time. Bankston says, do you think you owe it to Ben Brody to be as accurate as you could? So Spiro objects. Elon says, I aspire to be accurate no matter who the person is. Bankston says, do you think you've lived up to that duty to Ben Brody, or do you think you failed him? Elon says, I don't think he's been meaningfully harmed by this. So Bankston says, wow, okay, let's put up tab L. Hold on. Actually, take that down for a second. So Bankston says, why don't you think Ben Brody has been meaningfully harmed by this? Spiro says, yeah, the harm to Ben Brody, how is that relevant to... Mr. Bankston says, no, he might have some really malicious ideas coming out from him right now about this. I need to know what his feelings about Ben Brody are. Why do you think Ben Brody... So Spiro says, which category is this under and how is this relevant? Bankston says, his state of mind. Does he have ill will towards Ben Brody? Spiro says, oh, you can answer that. Do you have any ill will towards Ben Brody? You can answer that question. Bankston says, well, no, I want him to answer my question. Elon says, I have no ill will to Ben Brody. I don't know Ben Brody. Bankston says, okay, Elon, and I have no ill will to him. My goal is simply to have the X platform be the best source of truth on the internet. And when you try to figure out the truth of things, there's a debate. That debate, goes one way or the other, but it's a vigorous debate. There are a number of replies to you. You make a statement, people will reply and reply immediately. This is the advantage, fundamental advantage relative to the legacy newspapers where you can say whatever you want, but people can immediately rebut that, and then community notes can attach the best fact checker on the internet, can attach a correction to your original post. I think this is what enables the X platform to have the potential to be, and I think is the most accurate, timely, and truthful place on the internet. So, Bankston says, tell me why you think you don't think Ben Brody was harmed. Spiro says, no. Why, whether he was ultimately harmed or not, or what his damages are, and things like that is not relevant. He's not going to get into that. You can move on. I'm instructing him not to answer. Bankston says, okay, so again, I want to know, Mr. Musk seems to have personal feelings about Ben Brody, and whether he's been harmed or not, and in fact, seems to have the affirmative belief that he has not been meaningfully harmed, which tells me that Mr. Musk may know something more about Ben Brody than I think he does, because I don't think he knows anything about Ben Brody. So I want to ask him, why do you not think he's been meaningfully harmed? So Spiro says, yeah, again, Bankston goes, if he possesses the information, I'm definitely entitled to know. Spiro says, okay, well, I definitely think you're wrong, and you're trying to backdoor everything, and you know that, and so you can move on. So Bankston says, okay, you're not going to answer that, Mr. Musk? Are you going? Spiro says, he's not answering that. He's not. Bankston says, I didn't ask you anything. Spiro says, you know that he doesn't know anything about Ben Brody, and he already told you that he doesn't think he's been harmed. Bankston says, I don't know that. Wait, hold on. Mr. Spiro, you teased him. You just said it into the record. You teased out the fact that he doesn't have any ill will towards him. That's that. Mr. Bankston, no, I'm at an impasse because I have two contradictory answers. I have Mr. Musk saying he doesn't know anything about Ben Brody, and I have Mr. Musk testifying under oath that Ben Brody was not meaningfully harmed. Those two things don't go together, so I've got to figure out. Spiro says, we disagree. But if Mr. Musk wants to explain how they're not inconsistent, if you genuinely don't understand that, he can explain why those aren't inconsistent. I think this is nonsense and you know it, but that's fine. Elon says, people are attacked all the time in the media, online media, social media, but it is rare that actually has a meaningful negative impact on their life. Oh my god, all these side examples, I would have loved if he asked about that one major defamation case and what his opinion was. Mr. Bankston, okay, let's go to tab L. So, I think Bankston gave that one up. Unless it's still relevant to this question here, but he said he was going to go to L and said, wait, hold on. So let's see. So then Bankston asks, I want to show you another tweet that you tweeted on June 27th. All right, just after you tweeted about Ben Brody. And this tweet has somebody who is named, hold on. This is a tweet from somebody named Ava Fox Claudius Nero Legions. Jeez. That says a quote from Dale Carnegie, 99 times out of 100. People don't criticize themselves for anything, no matter how wrong it may be. And then he replied, quote, always err on the side of internalizing. Quote, always err on the side of internalizing responsibility. Do you see that? Elon says yes. And then, all right, would you consider that you were being truthful here in terms of that being something you believe? Is that right? Elon says yes. I think one should err on the side of internalizing responsibility. So Banks says, all right, so to bring it back to Ben Brody, do you think that maybe you acted recklessly and should acknowledge responsibility for that? Which post are you referring to? To the post you made about Ben Brody. When you said, based off Dr. Frenzer and Matt Wallace, when you said, it looks like one of the college students who wants to join the government, do you think you have any sense of acting recklessly or need to take responsibility for that? Spiro says, objection. He already answered this question. You can't backdoor it through some unrelated tweet when the judge told you which tweets were at issue. So Bankston says, wait, so Spiro says, I don't understand why you're doing this. You're just wasting everybody's time. Bankston says, I'm sorry, where is this? If you have it, please send it to me. Do you have a list of the tweets that I'm allowed to talk about? Spiro says, yes, it's in the order. The order said that it refers to tweets on a certain day and a time. It's not, if the order, the reporter, Mr. Spiro, your internet is cutting in and out. Mr. Spiro, can you hear me now? They're getting all what was it? Was that a Sprint commercial or Verizon? The reporter says yes. So Mr. Spiro says, okay, Yes, the order does refer to certain tweets within a time frame relating to this is in topic 2. So the way I read the order and the spirit of this was not for you to have a free-for-all into every tweet Mr. Musk made or saw. Your case is based on one tweet where he says, looks like. So Mr. Bankston says, right. So here I am asking about another tweet on the same day, about Mr. Musk's state of mind on that very day. And your state of mind, Mr. Musk, on that very day, was that a person should always err on the side of internalizing responsibility. That was your state of mind on June 27th, 2023. Elon says, that's just a general principle I believe in. Bankston says, all right, Mr. Musk, I don't have anything more for you today. Spiro says, okay, thank you. And then, so Spiro says he wants a copy. Oh, what? So Mr. Spiro, the reporter says, Mr. Spiro, so we heard about this in the sanctions. Mr. Spiro, I need to have you say on the record whether you want a copy of the transcript. So Spiro says, yes, and please mark it confidential. So Bankston says, I'm sorry, what? There's no protective order in this case. So Mr. Spiro says, we're asking for it to be deemed marked confidential until we address. Bankston says, under what authority? No, there's no PO. Mr. Spiro, well, that's what I'm asking for. You want to release it. So Spiro knew this as soon as he got in here. Mr. Bankston, then you need to move for a protective order. I don't know. Mr. Spiro, okay, then we'll move for a PO. But Mr. Bankston, right, over discovery that's already happened? Mr. Spiro said, yeah, okay. Bankston says, I'm absolutely positive there's not. So Spiro says, I'm asking. Mark, don't interrupt me. Mark, don't interrupt me. So Bankston says, all right. Spiro says, I'm asking that this transcript be marked confidential. That's what I'm asking for. I don't agree. So the reporter says, Mr. Spiro? And then Bankston says, yeah, he jumped off the record, but we're not off the record yet. The reporter, I need to find out if Mr. Musk wanted to read and sign his transcript. Bankston says, well, we're not going to find that out either because he just left. He had to go back to looking at his Greek community notes feature. I do need to make a record on what just happened for the court. Parties must obviously move for a protective order over discovery before it occurs. I am in no way bound to treat anything confidential. There is no confidential order in place. There is a method in which to do that. Attorneys from Quinn Emanuel should know very well how to do that. In fact, even Alex Jones's attorneys knew how to do that. Apart from that, there is not a single trade secret or anything confidential ever mentioned anywhere throughout this deposition. I'm very concerned that Mr. Spiro, and I think he quoted this paragraph in his motion for sanctions. I think he quoted himself here to make this argument. I'm very concerned that Mr. Spiro, a non-Texas lawyer who came to this deposition to practice law in violation of Texas law with no pro hoc vice admission, completely shut down many segments of the deposition, issued several instructions not to answer that were wholly inappropriate, completely interrupted and made objections outside of Rule 1995, and then, at the end of the deposition, demands that it be treated confidential. Mr. Spiro is clearly not following any of the procedures that would need to happen here. Given what he said, we will not discuss what happened here in this deposition with third parties until we talk to the court about it, obviously. But we will make sure for the record. We do not see any method on which to designate things as confidential, so we don't recognize that request as anything valid. If they want to pursue a Rule 76 at a future time, I mean, I guess they're welcome to try to do that. But again, just to state for the record, we are not under protective order. We have no obligation to abide by any confidentiality, and we reject wholeheartedly Mr. Spiro's unilateral attempts to place us under some sort of legal obligation. We do not recognize it whatsoever. And with that, we conclude the deposition today, and then they go off the record. So, well, that was fiery right at the end. They said, get it out, get it out before we go home. And then I know we probably got some comments over here. Oh, I wish I knew. You feel like that's going to be in the main case. Had to be one of those things that he was saying. That he thinks, what was the quote? He thinks that everything you should err on internalizing responsibility. All the people that just screamed out. Well, I think that was the dig, right? So, he's saying like even those guys who clearly he's taking a dig at them and saying even they know either way. So he was like trying to say you're from a respectable firm and you should definitely know better. You specifically, Alex Spiro. So, but I'm gonna wrap that up. I'm actually going to make a 3-course meal tonight because I don't have time this weekend to do dinner, and I usually do big dinners on Saturday nights. That's why I didn't plan to do this today, but I have something come up tomorrow, so I can't do this tomorrow. But let me know what you think getting here. I honestly think we saw most of, I don't know. I think as far as Bankston, we got to see all of his gripes in the motion for sanctions. And then it was still entertaining to see it in the actual context. But I do think some of the exciting things or like noteworthy things that we saw were kind of just like random sound bites and random general statements about things and learning a little bit more, according to Elon, about the way some of the features of Twitter, which is now known as X, actually works. I think we've heard enough about community notes, but I do think it was cool to learn that if you interact with it in any way, a clickable interaction, not just scrolling past something, if that post gets a community note, you get an interaction. I've gotten interactions about community notes that, you know, actually I've seen other people share the notification. I can picture them. I haven't gotten them personally, but I've seen other people, they'll notice and be like, aha, I got community noted. And then they'll post the notification. So I wasn't personally familiar with that notification. I've just kind of seen other people get it, and I didn't know how it triggered for people to get it. So that's really cool. Let's see. I'm hoping, thanks to all of his antics, the court will tell him, no, you're not allowed to work on this case because of your prior bad faith in the case. Yes, that's going to be interesting to see. And that's kind of like the other thing. Is that a catch-22 if you pull the attorney down? And what does that do to the integrity of this deposition? If you take down the only counsel that was present for Elon, if you say, oh my God, no, this is a mess, you gotta go, this guy is, whew, that was not great. What does that say about the integrity of the deposition if that was the witness's only counsel present? That's a catch-22 there. And the flip side of that is, you know, this is already in the public realm, right? This deposition. So it's not like you can like put the toothpaste back in the tube or whatever the saying is. But as far as what's admissible in court, what can come onto, in front of a jury, what if they have to redo this deposition? I mean, it would be something for us to see twice, right? We would get to see it again, unless maybe they ask for a protective order that time. But that could give Mark Bankston I think there were some moments where he lost his train of thought because he had to make some realizations about the tech side of how the X platform works. If he gets a go-to at a second round at a deposition, maybe that would be better for him than it would be for Musk, because he could sharpen up some of his questions. Maybe it could be better for Musk because he could, I don't know, sharpen up some of his responses. It's one of those things that it's just kind of like, I feel like it'll end up dragging the case out, if nothing else, which is probably great for all of the attorneys because they'll all get more billable hours. That's really the victory of anything like that. Just my take. But thanks so much, Barbara. I don't know, I don't see Tracker present anymore, but if Tracker's here too, thanks so much. Anyone else that's hanging out, you can leave your comments. We don't bite here. But yeah, thanks so much for joining in. And if there is a major update on this, if Alex Spiro gets sanctioned, we can hang out, talk about it.